good afternoon, everyone. We are so pleased you could join us as we look at issues for employers and employees as schools start to reopen. We are going to hear from Carla Saez about how the Family First Coronavirus Response Act may affect leave for employees when school reopens. First, a little bit about Carla. She is the Director of Human Resources at eEmployer Solutions, Inc. Carla manages and directs the overall provision of human resources services for eESI. Carla is an HR professional with extensive experience in managing a full spectrum of HR programs, services, and functions across multiple industries. She is a member of HR Houston and holds PHR and SHRM-CP certifications. So Carla, let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Carol. I appreciate the introduction. So to start, I think we're going to start with kind of a high-level overview of the things that might be hot topics today, right, when it comes to thinking about going back to school. Just as a reminder for everyone, this is not to be taken as legal advice. There might be some areas where we'll let you know that we recommend you consult with an attorney for more guidance, and that the situation is fluid. So as guidance comes out, we'll do our best to keep you updated, and the Chamber is a great place to get those updates. All right, so start with is the emergency paid sick leave. So on the next slide, we're going to kind of just briefly overview that. So this is if an employee is unable to work or telework. So the reasons for that could be 6. So these 6 reasons would be qualifying reasons. The ones we're focusing on for the presentation today would be reason number 5. The employee is caring for a child because of the school or the child care facility is closed. So those employees might have a need as they're thinking about going back to school for their children. You know, how are they going to manage that and what are they going to do? So reasons 4 through 6, so 5 falls within that, is paid at 2/3 the employee's regular rate of pay. Those are capped at $200 a day or $2,000 in aggregate. So it's up to 80 hours of leave that the employee has access to under the emergency paid sick leave. And on the next slide, we're going to talk about the Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act. So this one is interesting. For those of you that already have to comply with the FMLA, this one has some similarities, but one of the big differences is that an employee under traditional FMLA has to be with you for at least 12 months. But under this Emergency Expansion Act, the rule here is 30 days. So if you have an employee that's been with you just 30 days, they have access to and may request time off to care for their children. Some of the things here to pay attention to is that the employee is going to be unable to work or telework. So if telework is available, that employee should be encouraged to do that, and regular pay would apply. However, if telework is not an option for that employee, they should speak to their hiring managers or HR about options to take leave. So in this case, the child should be under age 18, and the school is closed. This is up to 12 weeks of job protected leave. So the first 10 days are unpaid. However, there are substitutions we'll talk about later for that time. And the rest of the 10 weeks are capped, as we said, $200 a day or $10,000 aggregate. What is interesting here, and might be new for some of you, is there is job restoration tied to this. So the employee that's out on leave should be allowed to return to work with the same or equivalent job that they had before they left. There are some exceptions to that. So if you have less than 25 employees, and let's say the pandemic has caused business slowness, those positions no longer exist, or the workplace had to close, those may be cases where you aren't able to restore that position. However, we do recommend before you make those decisions that you do consult with an attorney for legal advice there. All right, and on the next slide, we're going to talk about the first 2 weeks of emergency family leave. If we could just advance to the next slide. So the first 2 weeks of emergency leave can be handled in quite a few different ways. So the first one is that it can be taken concurrently. So the first 2 weeks, like we said earlier, are unpaid, so up to 80 hours. However, the employer may choose to allow the employee to substitute that time with unused vacation, sick, personal time, PTO, if the employee has it. Again, this is an agreement the employer has to make with that employee, and it should be consistent with all employees. Another area is that they can apply emergency sick leave if they have it. So if they haven't already used that time for another qualifying reason, such as caring for themselves because they were affected by COVID-19 or for another family member, they might still have that time and they can apply it to use within those first 10 days. Another thing is that the employer may allow the employee to substitute. Remember, this is at 2/3 pay. So the employer could allow the employee to make up the difference in that pay with unused vacation, sick, or personal time if they have it. So when we talk about exemptions under the FFCRA, there are some for employers that have less than 50 employees. However, it's important to note that the exemptions only apply to emergency paid sick leave, reason number 5, and the emergency expansion of the FMLA. So that's only to care for a child whose school or daycare is closed due to COVID-19 related reasons. So if we're talking about emergency paid sick leave, all other reasons would not qualify for exemption here, only for reason 5 and emergency FMLA. So you do have to have a documented reason for this. So an owner or officer of the company must document the reason they feel they're exempt from this. And you don't have to apply for exemption, you can just take it. However, we warn you that if you do decide to take exemption here, that you consult with legal advice to make sure you're checking all the boxes and that they feel good about that decision. All right, and on our next slide, we're going to turn it over to Kirsten.
Hello, everyone. Real quick, my name is Kirsten O'Malley, and I'm an HR business partner here at eESI with Carla. So regarding documentation for both the emergency paid sick leave and the extended family medical leave, we want to encourage you to make sure that you maintain documentation. That it includes the name, the dates the employee is requesting leave, and a statement as to why they are unable to work or telework that would qualify them under the FFCRA. Additionally, it's helpful under the emergency paid sick leave to have a statement as to, is this because a government entity is issuing a quarantine order? Is this under the advice of a physician if they have reached out for medical advice? How does this apply? Under the expanded FMLA, it's the same basic information as under the EPSL. However, you also need to include the name and age of the child or the children who are going to be cared for, the name of the school or place of care that is closed, as some type of a statement that no one else will be providing care for the child during the period of time that is being requested. And also that if the need for leave is being requested for a child who is over 14 years of age, there needs to be a statement as to the special circumstances, because the guidelines that have been given forth are that children over the age of 14 and over can probably take care of themselves for the most part, so there just needs to be an explanation. What we would really encourage you to do with your employee that is requesting these leaves is to have that conversation. You need to find out specifically what are the reasons that they are asking for accommodation under the EPSL or the expanded family medical leave, and document that information. We do have, eESI has created a kind of standardized form that we are sharing with our clients, and we'll be happy to share with you at the end of the presentation if that would be helpful for you. It's a very basic document, but important to keep everything written down. If we could see the next slide, please. The recording requirements, and this is why we encourage documentation, is that you maintain that documentation for 4 years, regardless of whether you granted or denied the leave of absence. This is a protection for you as the employer. If your conversations with the employee have been oral, then please, as the employer, document those conversations, document the request, and retain those statements in the same way. What we would like to do now is to go over some of the frequently asked questions that we've been receiving, and possibly you as well.
Thank you, Kirsten. So the first question is, who is considered a son or daughter under the FFCRA? So simply put, a son or daughter is your own child which includes your biological, foster, stepchildren, legal wards, or any child that you are standing to have day-to-day responsibilities and care for financially. Next slide. The next slide, please. Could be, children could also be age 18 or older. So if this child has a mental or physical disability and they're incapable of self-care because of that disability, they could fall into son or daughter as defined by the regulations. In our next slide, we're going to talk about who is a child care provider.
So a child care provider is anyone who cares for your child. This could be someone who is paid to provide child care, a nanny, au pair, a babysitter. It can also be an individual who provides care at no cost and without a license on a regular basis, as it states here. For example, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, anyone who provides that care for a child. Just real quickly, you will notice on many of these slides in parentheses, we reference DOL, FAQ, and a number. That is to let you know that the information that we're providing here is on the DOL website. It's under frequently asked questions, and the number represented is the question that is addressed on the DOL website, so that you can cross-reference that as well. Next slide.
All right, so some other questions you might get is, may I take expanded family medical leave to care for a child other than my child? So the answer is no, unless, again, we refer back to the regulations, unless they meet the definition of a son or a child, right? However, the guidance might change a little bit when it says, may I take paid sick leave to care for a child other than my child? So for reason 5, and as a refresher, reason 5 was because the child care or school is closed. The answer for that is no. They are not able to take paid sick leave for someone other than their own child. But the answer changes a little bit when it comes to the FMLA. It's a maybe. And the reason for that is, under FMLA, you want to make sure that you and your hiring managers have training in this area, that we're not just saying no because it's not your son or daughter. You want to make sure you understand the need for leave and who it is that the employee is requesting leave for. And partly that's because there may be some times where the leave is for someone who is unable, or for a child that's unable to care for themselves. So we want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what qualifies as son or daughter before we say yes or no to those. However, you are not able to take paid sick leave for someone in which you have no relationship or no expectation to provide for financially or care for. And on the next slide, we'll talk about intermittent leave.
So the question that comes up is, may I take intermittent leave to care for my child? And the short answer is yes. If the employee is requesting this because the school or provider is closed due to COVID, and the employer and the employee both agree to the arrangement, then this answer is yes. Now, here are some things to keep in mind. Again, we encourage this arrangement, if you both agree on it, that it be done in writing, including the details of when is the employee going to work, how are hours going to be submitted to the employer, those types of things. Make sure that you're applying this consistently, that anyone who requests intermittent leave is considered consistently and fairly. Let me give you an example. If an employee has a child or children who are going to be doing school online, remotely, and they are going to be face-to-face with their teacher, let's say from 8 to 10 in the morning and 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And then outside of those hours, they are going to need an adult to help keep them doing their work, doing their homework, monitoring their self-study, keeping them on track. Then that employee could request that they work from 8 to 10 while the child is being monitored, 1 to 3, so those 4 hours, and then they would have to come with a proposal for when the other 4 hours of that 8-hour shift would be made up, okay? So that they could then be free to monitor their child or children during those additional hours. Keep in mind that the cap still applies for the number of hours someone can take that leave. It'll be very important to keep accurate records and that those records be submitted to the employer so that everyone can monitor. We also would encourage you, if you decide to take on an intermittent leave arrangement, that after perhaps 2 weeks, you set up a time to meet with the employee and see how it's going. Is this working both from the employer's perspective and from the employee's perspective? If not, what changes can be made to that? Or if it is, great, then we can continue. So the next slide is about if there's a hybrid happening in the education of the child.
Yeah. So if the child school or place of care has moved to online instruction, which we know a lot of school districts are doing, in those cases, and when a child is expected to complete assignments at home, is it considered closed as defined under the Act? And the answer is yes. So if the physical location where your child receives instruction is closed, it's considered closed for the purpose of the Act, even if instruction is happening online. So that's important to remember, that you and your hiring managers know what school districts your employees have children within, and that you know how they're doing instruction this upcoming school year, because there might be a few different rules and regulations that you have to comply with and consider. Then our next slide, we're going to talk about in-person learning and options.
So the question here is, can an employee take leave if their child's school is open, the physical building, but the employee opts out of in-person learning and selects remote learning instead? So generally the answer is no. In order to be eligible under the FFCRA, the physical location for instruction or care must be closed. However, if a school is operating at reduced capacity so that social distancing can happen, then there is a possibility that it would apply under FFCRA. Again, you can see that there are some gray areas within the administration of these guidelines as the situation develops. So we would encourage you to continue to ask the questions, to go to the DOL website, to go to the CDC website and look for the latest updates as we get closer and closer further into the school year to see what guidance has been given out. And the next slide.
So what if the school is open, but my employee chooses remote learning option because the child is vulnerable to COVID-19 and the healthcare professional recommended against in-person learning? So again, we encourage you to keep asking the questions and have a good conversation with these employees before deciding on leave options. So in this case, emergency FMLA is not available because the physical location of the child's school is open. However, just because that's not available, let's think about what could be. So in this case, emergency paid sick leave might be available. You know, if the child qualifies under one of those qualifying reasons, the 6 that we looked at earlier, the employee might be able to qualify under that to care for that child that's particularly vulnerable to COVID-19. Let's say they've already exhausted emergency paid sick leave. Are we done exploring our options? No, probably not. You want to take a look at traditional FMLA. Is that an option for these employees if they have a child that can't go to school because they're unable to due to some type of condition they may have? So under FMLA, the employee might be able to take leave to care for that child if they need to. All right, and with that, on the next slide, we're going to thank you and turn it back over to Carol.
Thank you very much, Carla and Kirsten. Next, we're going to hear from Gail Figueroa to get an insight into how AMOCO Federal Credit Union has approached the school reopening in their business. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gail, but also I want to remind you that at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat box. And if you have questions as we're going through these materials for any of these panelists, please put a question in the chat box, and so you'll have an opportunity to have that question answered. Let me come back to Gail. Gail is the Chief Administration Officer for AMOCO Federal Credit Union. Gail's been doing that job since 2016, and she leads all functional areas of administration, including human resources, marketing, business development, facilities, and branch expansion. Her authenticity and strategic approach helped the credit union build a strong future for AMOCO members, employees, and the community. So Gail, I'm going to hand this off to you. Gail.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I had the phone on mute. Okay, let's start over. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carol, for that introduction, and thank you, Kirsten and Carla, for that wealth of information that none of us want to think about right now. As mentioned, my name is Gail Figueroa, and I'm the Chief Admin Officer at AMOCO. Over the past 23 years, I've worked in various roles, but for the past 15 years, I've worked in this capacity, which oversees the Human Resources Department. If you're wondering why I'm here today, well, because our organization is going through the same thing a lot of you are going through today. And you may or may not know this, but the current chairman of the board for the Clear Lake Chamber of Commerce just happens to also be my president and CEO, fearless leader, Sean Bailey. So a few weeks ago, he and Cindy were discussing the fact that employers have expressed concerns about what they're dealing with right now, especially with the start of school just around the corner. So I'm here to talk about some of the questions we've had to ask ourselves as they've unfolded over the last 4 to 5 months. So if we can go on to the next slide. Just to kind of give you some insight into us as an organization. Some of you may or may not know some of this about us, but in case there is anyone out there that doesn't, we currently serve about 88,000 members. We have 7 standalone branches. In addition to those locations, we have 3 of what we call micro branches, all of which are closed currently due to COVID. And because of where they're located. Our Clear Lake branch is closest to your chamber office, and it's closed currently because there's no drive-through facility at this location. These 10 branches are primarily in Galveston County, but they do stretch into the Harris and Brazoria counties as well. And as you can imagine, this widens the geographical area of where our employees live, which means school districts too. Of our 250 employees, we still have about 75% working from home, and the other 25% are basically running and operating our branches. These are the member-facing employees that we need there to actually operate the day-to-day. Back in March, mid-March, we sent our non-essential and back office employees home, and we made an attempt to reopen our lobbies in June. Big mistake. We did bring some employees back and some departments back, staggering them. But during that attempted return to normalcy, we had our first positive case within the credit union, and the overall area had spiked in the number of cases. So we did revert back to how we were operating, and we've continued to operate in that manner ever since. Not sure how many of you have had to adapt to the new way of doing business, but I know we certainly have. We've never thought, we never in a million years thought we would be handling loan applications and opening new accounts in our drive-thrus, but that's what is required right now, and that's what we're actually doing, and the members are loving it. And I think it's very possible that this new way of doing business could also be here to stay. Members love it. I love going to Macy's and picking up my my online shopping order that I placed. But the curbside options for delivery and some of the businesses that you probably run as well have been beneficial, and it might be an expectation that's there even after this is all said and done. So if I could have you flip over to the next screen, I just wanted to point out a few things. First of all, we don't have all the answers. I don't want to pretend to know everything. I don't think anyone at this point really does. We're rolling with the punches just like all of you. We're trying to get guidance from as many reliable resources as possible, similar to what you heard earlier. It seems every day we're receiving new information and developments. Then we have to take that information, evaluate it, and interpret it to see how it applies to our business, right? What works for one organization or company may not necessarily work for another. And no one, and I mean no one, has the perfect solution right now. And if you do know someone, please share with the group because we'd love to hear it. Nonetheless, we have to figure out what the best path is for our own business and make every attempt to plan for the long term because we really don't know how long it will be in this environment. And we all know this is certainly tough to do when we don't have a crystal ball right in front of us. Can't stress enough that you have to assess your own business and do what's best for you. And by all means, don't overpromise. you may want to do everything in the world for your employees right now, but you don't want to overpromise something that is not sustainable in the future. I'm the first one to tell you, I feel we have the best employees out there, but you do have to tread with caution for a number of reasons. Like I said, don't overpromise or commit to something you can't sustain long term. You do have to put on your devil's advocate hat on and consider all the ways employees might feel they could take advantage of the situation, even though there are some obligations that we're all subject to. But, you know, we have to weigh the risks and finalizing your plan before you communicate to them. As you know, a lot of our employees are smarter than us, and they will figure out something before we do a lot of times. So it may even be a good idea to put a panel together of your employees and get their feedback on some ways that they could benefit from what you could offer them. But no matter what you go with, you do have to find a balance, and it can't be detrimental to your business. Just know that none of you are alone in this. We're all dealing with the same thing, just in different aspects. So moving on to the next slide, some of the questions I wanted to mention that we thought about as an organization as the fall school year is quickly approaching. No one, I don't think, anticipated we'd still be in this environment. We thought everything would go back to normal by the time fall year started, but here we are. And I was asked to talk to you today so I could share what all we're doing to prepare for the back to school dilemma that most companies are dealing with these days. But again, I definitely don't know all the answers, so take it with a grain of salt, take it back to your organization and see if any of these ideas work for you. Here are some of the basics that every business has probably already considered, but just some additional things that may be something that hasn't been thought of. Number one, I think, I don't remember if it was Carla or Kirsten, but one of them mentioned that gathering information about your employees is key. We definitely encourage you to ask your employees what their personal situation is to evaluate who is actually impacted and how this might in turn impact your business operations. We asked our employees questions like, do they have school-age dependents? Most districts and what they're able to offer have been able to offer the virtual option or the brick and mortar option. So we've asked them which option they've gone with or elected or planning to elect. If their kids are willing and or able to work independently, or if they depend on the employee to help them throughout the day, similar to what was described earlier. We've also asked what district their kids fall under and how they get to and from school every day, since buses are for the most part being discouraged because of the lack of ability to social distance. Also, a lot of times daycares align with what the school districts do, so it's important to find out if they have dependents in daycare too. We've asked if they had an alternative backup plan if their child's daycare or school closed and reverted back to the at-home learning that occurred back in March. Some organizations or businesses have taken the stance that the school dilemma is the employee's problem. We're trying to be a little bit more empathetic to the employee situation because this isn't something anyone anticipated. We're also thinking about the potential turnover we could face if the COVID situation doesn't improve and parent employees are forced to make a decision. And of course, the first 3 weeks of the school year, most districts will be closed completely. So at minimum, anyone that's subject to the FFCRA and emergency paid FMLA will have to accommodate their employees because of the school closure. And as mentioned earlier, also, this was a little unclear at first, but we've interpreted a little bit further. But as it was mentioned earlier, the choice that parents make regarding the in-person or the online route is irrelevant if a school is not shut down. As long as this child's school is open and they're able to attend in person, we as employers aren't necessarily required to accommodate the employee in that case unless some of those accommodations needed for traditional FMLA come into play. So some of the other things that you should probably be asking yourself, you've probably already been in this situation, but are any of your employees able to telecommute or remote work? Do you currently have anyone that's remote working? And can you continue to offer that alternative long run? Can they actually perform their job from home? Back when we deployed our remote workers, we communicated to our employees that working from home is not a substitute for childcare. And I still believe this to be the case, but we're also not naive to think that interruptions don't occur throughout the day. with kids and spouses potentially at home, doorbells ringing, dogs barking, and so on. I can attest, I have 2 young kids, and the juggle is real. Trying to assist them with their schoolwork while trying to address their IT issues with trying to connect to school and Zoom and everything else, and trying to get my own work done. It's definitely a challenge. I'm an exempt employee, fortunately, though, so I can work after hours, weekends, and just do what I need to do when it needs to get done. But for the hourly employees, we're a little bit more empathetic because they are member-facing most of the time, and they're expected to be available at certain hours during the day. They don't have the same luxury that our salary employees have, which brings up yet another challenge that I think we all face if we have hourly employees. So if you have non-exempt employees working from home, how do you ensure that they're not working when they're off the clock, and they are working when they're on the clock? Are you tracking the hours? They have to be paid for the hours that they're worked. So what systems do you have in place to track that activity? And, you know, the no-brainer is whether or not they have the equipment that's needed to do their job. Do they have a computer? Do they have internet access? And what must you pay for as an employer if you're asking them to do this? If we can go on to the next slide. I think the big question is just evaluating all of this information and just determining how this is going to affect your business. Are your employees productive at home? Will the customer service, if you're a customer service business, will it be impacted if your employees are remote and their children are there? Will your customers and clients be understanding if you're interrupted by a toddler dancing in the background? It seems to be the norm now. I know you see YouTube videos and TikTok and everything else these days, and they're quite comical, but it's definitely something to think about because you don't want it to appear as though you're at risk. Privacy, I mean, there's a number of issues depending on your business, things that you need to be concerned about this particular thing in general. Let's see, and hopefully, as Carla or Kirsten mentioned, hopefully you know by now whether or not you're subject to the expanded FMLA or whether or not you're obligated to provide the paid leave if schools or daycares were to close. If you're not sure, it's definitely something you need to find out as soon as possible so that you can start abiding by those laws. If we can go on to the next slide. How far will you go as far as accommodations go? Accommodations, options for employees. We know that all jobs can't be performed from home. There's still a lot of unknowns, but each district varies to some degree, and regardless, we all have to deal with our employees at minimum trying to juggle work and homeschool for that first 3 weeks of school. Is flex scheduling something you're able to offer? Staggered work hours, could that help your situation? Could you do split shifts, offer off hours, after hours than what you normally do to get their work done so that they can assist with helping their children during the day? Sick leave policies. If you don't have sick leave policies in place, it's something that you might want to consider. Having the flexible sick leave policies for employees who are ill due to COVID or for any reason for that matter, but those who may have been exposed or who might be caring for someone who's sick are a good idea if you don't already have them in place, because the last thing you want in this situation is to make an employee feel obligated to come to work while sick and potentially infecting their coworkers, and it's starting kind of a snowball effect there. Some of the creative and possible solutions that I've heard of recently that we're just really talking about right now, we haven't committed to anything, but I've heard of at least one school district in our area that is, in our area specifically, they're offering something called learning labs where the parents will be able to apply to send their kids to. I believe what they're doing is targeting those with no technology resources or maybe single parents, but it sounds like potentially working parents could be an option for this learning lab environment as well. And I know not all businesses have resources to do some of these things, but you could consider a more creative approach or alternative option. I know some businesses have thought, thinking outside the box, they want to provide a tutor for school-age children for parent employees. They call them parent employer pods. Those are some options. I know of some parents who get together to get the group of kids so that they can teach them in smaller environments, or at least make sure they're staying on track. For younger children, I've heard of the nanny share arrangements where they have a small group of employees, children, where they get them in a small group and they share the expense of that nanny. Some have opened up daycares in their own office, but I caution that if you decide to do something like that, you have to make sure you weigh and consider the risks there. Make sure your insurance liability policy covers something of that nature. Look at the safety issues you might have in the environment that your business is in, and then making sure that you don't discriminate against any employees. You make sure you apply it consistently, as mentioned previously as well. I think if we can just go to the last slide, really, in my humble opinion, employees just want a sense of security. They want some assurance of their job being there, and FMLA protection certainly helps with that, but they feel as though they can't do anything because they're tied right now as to what the school districts are doing. And I think the most important thing you can do right now is communicate with your employees and let them know where you stand, even if you don't have all the answers yet. I think communicate. I think that's by far the best thing that you can do right now for them, just to assure them that you are not dismissing everything that's going on in this environment, and you really do empathize with their situation, and you're doing what you can as an employer to help with that situation. So that pretty much sums up everything at this point. If I think of anything, or if we implement anything else that might be of assistance, I will definitely be sure and share that information. But I do thank you, the Chamber, for inviting me to participate today, and I welcome any questions if you should have any.
So thank you, Gail, for those insights. And we are going to go ahead and open this up for some questions. And Carla, Gail, and Kirsten, feel free to, if you have answers to these questions, go ahead and just kind of jump in. So the first question we have is, does the paid emergency leave apply to all businesses, including nonprofits?
So we're going to take that question. And so the information we have been able to find is that yes, there are no exclusions, for-profit, nonprofit, those types of things. It is all about the number of employees in the organization. Yep. So
I just wanted to add that I was just going to say we are a not-for-profit, so not quite a for-profit, but not quite a nonprofit. So we're kind of in between, but we're subject to that same.
Did you have something to add, Carla?
Yeah, I was just going to remind everyone that if you were looking for an exemption, that would apply to small businesses under 50, but only for number 5 of the emergency paid sick leave or the expansion FMLA. So, and again, we encourage you to seek legal advice if you want to take advantage of an exemption or the small business exemption.
So here's a question that seems to be pretty tricky for businesses, and it's intermittent leave. Intermittent leave is tricky even with when you're under the regular FMLA, but now we have a lot of other issues playing into this. So can you tell us, is this intermittent leave going to be both under the emergency sick leave and also under the emergency FMLA?
Sure. So intermittent leave is interesting, as you noted. However, for emergency paid sick leave, employees have to use it. So, and usually it's for a very good reason, to control the spread. So there's 80 hours available there, 6 different reasons to take advantage of that. But they would use that fully. Under the expanded FMLA, they are able to take it intermittently. If they have a need for that, we encourage them to speak to their employer and agree on a schedule, agree on amount of leave they're taking, and then move forward, and to remind them they want to be consistent. So if you're allowing, one person flex scheduling, you want to open that up for everyone, but there may be a requirement to do that under the expanded FMLA.
So under the expanded FMLA, Carla, would it also be uh, that the employee, if they take the intermittent leave and say they can only work 4 hours a day because their children are there for 4 hours and they have no one to supervise the remote learning that might be going on. So if they only can work 4 hours a day, would they be entitled to take the other 4 hours as intermittent leave every day?
Yeah, they could. So that's a perfect example. So when we're talking about remote learning, what we're finding is remote learning isn't, you know, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. It might be for 3 or 4 hours a day, and there might be times where the employee needs to supervise their children at home, and that's when they need to talk to their employer and say, hey, there are times where I might need to take intermittent leave, you know, whether it's every day or every Thursday or every other day. And that's a discussion they need to have with their worksite employer.
And Gail, I know you talked a little bit about that a large segment of your employees are doing telework or working remotely. And so can you share with the other employers, did you have a policy for teleworking or how did you set that up?
We did have a policy for telecommuting, and when we started this whole, we actually started our telecommuting discussions a couple of years ago, but we were never completely 100% comfortable with it. So we were limiting who we were going to allow the telecommuting to be, and that was primarily upper management or exempt employees because of the ease and not as much concerning about the non-exempt employee tracking hours and things like that. So we had started this discussion a couple of years back, had put things in place, had a policy in place, actually had an agreement in place that we had all of our exempt employees sign, but it was really, it wasn't 4 days out of the 5, it was just kind of random days. We might do once a month. You know, we hadn't really even gotten to that point yet. But then COVID happened, and I remember a meeting on a Friday, March 13th, Friday the 13th, discussing this whole situation and how it just exploded overnight, it seemed like. We had been getting pieces of information about how it was coming to the U.S., but we never imagined it would be this in this setting right now. But March 13th, we were discussing it, and the following Wednesday, I think it was, is when we had 75% of our employees working from home, and that included exempt and non-exempt employees. So we modified quickly our telecommuting agreement, pushed that out to all employees to sign, got VPN set up. We had a lot of systems in place, fortunately, that we had been working on leading up to this. And about a week prior to pushing everyone to the remote environment, we had actually upgraded our phone system. And so the credit union gods, we say, were looking out for us, and we had a lot of things in place that enabled us to be able to do that. But yeah, it was a step in the right direction for us, and it quickly got us to the comfort level that we were struggling with for a couple of years. And now it's strange. We find that a lot of our employees are actually very productive at home, even more so than they are at work, because they don't have the constant interruptions of coworkers and the need to visit with each other throughout the day. It's just a strange mix. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but yes, to answer your question, we had some telecommuting agreements that we had in place prior to this that we quickly modified to incorporate some of the non-exempt employees that are now doing the same.
And can someone who has only used part of their leave, like, because we kind of have two segments going on here. We had a pretty good thing going in Texas for a while, and school ended and kids went to camp and different things, but so maybe your employees only use part of their leave. Can they come back now and use whatever time might be remainder for the school year?
Yes, I don't know if Carla, you want to take that, or Kirsten, but they have up to the 12 weeks, right? I'll let you take it.
Nope, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so it's very well that they could have used some of that leave and then maybe had arrangements for the summer, and now that school might be picking up, you're right. Gail, they definitely have the full 12 weeks that they can use under the expansion FMLA.
And one thing I wanted to mention there, if someone's subject to traditional FMLA, it's a combined 12 weeks total for the year. So if they used FMLA for a different reason earlier in the year before COVID hit, they only have the balance to use depending on the employer's, whether they're using a rolling calendar or a calendar year, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So it still maps at the 12 weeks.
I want to express thanks to all of our panelists. These are tough questions, and as you said, the situation is fluid. So to each one of you, Kirsten, Carla, and Gail, thanks so much for providing some really tough answers and at least giving our employers and employees some really good food for thought. So I'm going to turn this back over for the chamber to make their closing arguments or statements.
Thank you, Carol. That was a great transition. I really appreciate it. One of our favorite attorneys here at the chamber. But again, thank you, ladies. I really appreciate you being here and having this discussion with us. I did want to give everyone a few quick announcements. Our One Clear Lake group, which is our nonprofit group, they are meeting again on Wednesday, August 19th. I know I've got some nonprofit friends in the audience, so make plans to be there for that program. Also, we're really excited. Our general membership luncheon that's coming up August 26th, it's still going to be a virtual luncheon, but we have Dana Steele coming to speak to us. She's going to be talking about rockstar principles of success. So really excited about an uplifting program. She's going to bring high energy to that. So mark your calendars, come out and join us for that. Also, I don't know if you guys have seen on our social media platforms, but we are celebrating our 58th anniversary at the Chamber of Commerce. It's actually this Saturday, August 8th. So we've been doing some reminiscing and pulling up some old pictures from the archives. So go and take a look at those on our Facebook and Instagram accounts. We'll continue the celebrations through August, maybe even have a giveaway or two on our social media. So again, go through Saturday, this Saturday. And also it's our membership campaign. So every August we concentrate our efforts on making sure to spread the word about joining the chamber. So please, share that with your colleagues. We have a little fun with it during this month, and we do some prize drawings at the end of the month for everyone who has joined. So if you have colleagues that you've been thinking, hey, I really need to tell them about the chamber, there's a lot of great information, programs like this, very specifically where they can get answers to some tough questions, make sure to share that information with them. So that's really all I have. Again, can't thank you guys enough for being here with us today and providing this information. We'll be sending this out to our members as well in our Monday weekly window email, so everyone will have access to all of this. So thank you so much, and we will see you guys soon.